Well, good afternoon. We have a nice intimate crowd. Welcome. I think I know everybody. I'm not the only one, but professor here. And how many of you, where are you from? Yes. From China. Do you speak Bahasa? No. How many people in this room speak Bahasa? You do.
Well, of course.
So, I was described or wrote an article about Indonesia, entitling it the hidden giant. It's almost a quarter of a million people, right? Give or take a few tens of millions. So many Switzerlands. It's a very, very big society. It's been very much engaged in trade. The spice trade, going back to the 15th century, is considered to be one of the first global trades to ever occur. The spice route from Indonesia, so we have a lot of trade, things like nutmeg, pepper, and so on and so forth to Indonesia. It's a country I have known for a relatively long time. It's achieved quite tremendous things recently. It has a population of about 250 million. It is in the process, or has been in the process for the last 15 years, very successful democratization. We're going to hear more about this. It has a country which is predominantly Muslim, the biggest Muslim country in the world for now. Pakistan is soon going to take over. But it has a minorities of Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and so forth. And it's a place that is extremely fascinating to discover. Of course, there's Bali, but there's not just Bali. So we're very grateful to Agung, who is with us here, Wicaksono, who is an academic. He teaches at the very prestigious Bandung Institute of Technology and has obtained degrees from Germany as well as Switzerland and Indonesia. He works closely with the current government in advising on delivery. He joined us in 2012 for an OWP session in Indonesia, which was highly appreciated. And so I'm very much looking forward to listening to you, Agung. Very welcome. Cheers.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre, for the introduction. A very good afternoon, everyone, in a lovely weather of Lausanne, a weather I didn't expect. It is as warm as Jakarta, almost. Yeah. So I like it very much that I can come here again for the second time to IMD. In 2012, I was here. I was sharing about Indonesia also, based on an invitation of an Indonesian student at IMD at that time. So when this year I come again, I was thinking whether I should or I should not come to IMD because you have heard about it. But then I feel that it's very important to do it because after lunch, Jean-Pierre was asking an MBA students whether there is anyone in the MBA class right now from Indonesia. And the student said, oh yeah, there is somebody from Singapore. Then where I decided, yes, I have to talk about Indonesia because those are two different countries. Yeah. It's going to be a story. It's going to be an experience of mainly the 10 years. So yes, 15 years of democracy, but mainly the last 10 years under the leadership of a president called Yudhoyono, or people call it SBY. And I'm telling you about it today because this is the election year in Indonesia. This is a political year in Indonesia, and I believe it will be of value for you to know about it, what is happening in the country, what are the lessons, and what might be the implication for Indonesia, as well as implication for businesses, for countries that have dealings with Indonesia. So I'm titling it as Preparing for Indonesia Post-Yudhoyono on Democracy, Decentralization, Leadership, and Governance. So in the global landscape, Indonesia right now is the 16th largest economy in the world, so that's why it's a member of G20. It has a population of about 250 million. 45 million of that are middle class, consuming class. So you can imagine the size of the economy. 53% of the population in cities producing 74% of GDP, so urbanization is pretty high. And 55 million are skilled workers, and as a market, it's a $500 billion market in consumer, agriculture, fisheries, and also education. In the global scale, last year, Indonesia has also ascertained its importance with the APEC summit hosted in Bali last September. So here in this picture, you see this is the President SBY, and he's next to one of the most powerful person in the world, Xi Jinping, the President of China. And the other one is another powerful person who is, I think, the most talked about person in Europe right now, Vladimir Putin. So they were there in the same summit. That is seen as, I think, as a success. Obama didn't come. John Kerry came because Obama had to handle the shutdown at that time, the government shutdown. But this was seen as, you know, how Indonesia aspires to play a role in a global scale. In a more specific topic is on trade, and the WTO had their interministerial meeting also in Bali at the end of last year, and that was also seen as a remarkable milestone, because this is the first time another set of agreement can be reached after the Doha round. So the Bali package that was massaged through by Director General Roberto Azevedo from Brazil, and the chairman of the meeting, which happens to be the Indonesian Trade Minister Gita Wirjawan. It was a tough day. It was a tough 2 days conferences, you know, with issues coming from India rejection on agriculture policy, and then also Cuban and so on. But at the wee hours of a Saturday morning, the deal was sealed, and it was finally a successful conference, and largely to the role of the host. So those are the sort of role Indonesia is currently playing right now. And when we talk about democracy, I took this picture of the most recent Economist edition, asking about what's gone wrong with democracy, you know. And in the cover, at the top of that, you see one of the topic is saving Ukraine. Yeah. So yes, there are questions, there are issues with democracy in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. Maybe you would argue this is not only about democracy, but it's also about international affairs and politics and so on. But clearly there is an issue. The Orange Revolution that we cheered, you know, almost 10 years ago has not actually ended. Yeah, it's still ongoing. Closer to home, closer to Indonesia, democracy also face challenge with the situation in Thailand. In Bangkok, this is now, you know, a daily scene. Protesters keep lining up in front of the government building, you know, threatening and wanting the government to step down, while the government insisted that they are the democratically elected government, and therefore they said, okay, if you want to get rid of me, then we'll hold an election. But then the protesters said, no, we're not gonna recognize an election organized by you because you're just a puppet of the previous prime minister that they deposed. So it's a never-ending cycle of whether it's going to be an election or what they wanted is also actually a revolution. So this is a problem. This is an issue happening in about democracy in Southeast Asia. I would say that we're pretty lucky in Indonesia that the situation is not as bad, or maybe we can be very happy and proud that this is a functioning democracy in the last 15 years. So, and especially it will be signified by the fact that once I return to Indonesia, this weekend will be the beginning of the campaign period for a legislative election, which is, I think, in terms of size, is probably one of the largest in the earth. It's going to be an election with 12 national political parties. Actually, there are 15 political parties, but there are 3 parties that are only contesting in the special autonomy area of Aceh. There are 200,000 candidates, running for seats. 200,000 candidates, and every one of those candidates try to put their face on trees, on doors, everywhere. So you get sick of faces, actually, yeah. And because the voters are 187 million, yeah. But if this goes well, it will be the 4th free, fair, and relatively peaceful election that we had, the 4th already, since the end of the rule of Suharto. So Suharto was a president ruling for more than 30 years with a military background, with a more or less an authoritarian rule, managed elections, so to speak. Since his fallout in '98, we have then already 3 elections of parliaments, and we are coming to the 4th one sometime starting next week. And voting, why there are 200,000 candidates? Because the voting is actually for about 19,000 seats throughout the country. So we have a parliamentary system that consists of a national parliament, then also 34 provincial parliaments, and 520 district and city parliaments throughout the country, all being done in the same day. So this is a challenge, but we have done that 3 times. So there should be no reason we can't do it, and hopefully we are going to do it next month. So 9th of April, that's going to be the day. Yeah, and this is going to be also a historically very important election, because from the result of this parliamentary election, then the winning parties who get at least 20% of the seats or 25% of the votes, or it can be combination of parties, they can nominate the candidate for president and vice president. And this is going to be a presidential election that is going to replace this person, this gentleman, who has been in the seat for 10 years, and that's for Indonesian standard, and I believe also in many democracy standard is quite long. And he is a leader of a decade. So he's been a president of Indonesia for 1 decade. He was elected twice with a direct election of 1 man, 1 vote. So every citizen 1 vote. And he won through landslides at both elections in 2004 and 2009. So he's
Question?
Yeah, sure.
Has that changed now? It's no longer 1 man, 1 vote?
It is still a 1 man, 1 vote. So
What was the previous thing about parties nominating the president?
the parties nominate the presidential and vice presidential candidate that the people will vote for. So only candidates that secured the support of parties, and this is a lot under debate right now, because people are claiming that, well, why can't independent run, as presidential candidates? But right now the law still state that in order to run as a president, you have to be nominated by parties or combination of political parties. And also very important, he cannot run anymore because he has served 2 terms. He will serve 2 full terms, and by that he will be the only, I think, Indonesian president that is elected and then serving full term. We had before that presidents elected by the parliament, but none of them managed to serve full terms. He did serve 2 full terms, yeah, and by law he cannot run anymore. So this is then become exciting. Yes, Arturo.
To understand the mechanism correctly, if only political parties with more than 20% of the votes can nominate the candidate, it may be possible that you run presidential elections with 1 single candidate.
It cannot, because you can either have parties or combination of political parties. So say there are parties with 15% and 5% votes, they can then combine and then nominate a candidate. Yeah. So SBY, as we usually call him because the name is pretty long, is a leader with a lot of praise from the global world. So APEC was just one of that. He was pretty recently selected to chair the high-level panel of eminent persons for post-2015 development agenda assigned by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of the UN, together with David Cameron and Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president of Liberia, in order to build the recommendation for the vision of development post-MDG, and MDG ends in 2015. So he was recognized that way. He was then, appointed as champion of disaster preparedness or something. He then got, several recognition from the British Queen and so on. So globally, he's well recognized. But at home, he's, in the near the end of the term, his popularity is battled. Maybe that's the effect of democracy. You don't want to have somebody too long. People get tired of you. So over the 8 year, exactly I think around 7, 8 year, then he was, being in a lot of criticism at home. But if he survives until the end of the year, and until right now, it's already 10 years, so he would actually be known, be remembered as a leader, democratically elected, that has, survived democracy. Now, the question is, what are his legacies? 10 years is long for a country, especially now in the fast moving world, like now with technology, with distance getting closer and so on. So people are questioning at home, what are his legacy? And here, I think I'm going to share you what are his key legacy, which is not only within his 10-year terms, but is actually a accumulation of the whole democratization process happening in the last 15 years. First, democracy has changed the leadership landscape in Indonesia. When SBY ran for president in 2004, he was seen as, as a smart guy, a military general, but also had a PhD. So, very, very correct in his attitude, charming, and so on. So, and he has all political correctness. This is his posture, He always speaks with the right manner. He consults his advisor on how, to very detailed on before delivering every statement. Yeah. So he's the kind of person. Well, apparently with democracy, where people can say about anything, can criticize, and people have seen more and more politicians being, so to speak, polished, people want to have somebody who is not like that, at least in the coming election. So here you see somebody that, let's say, we call it as somebody among us. In this picture is governor of the Jakarta, which is our capital, Jokowi. Anyone can tell which one is that person? Maybe if you've seen Indonesia before. No. So why? This is a picture of him. This is the governor. This is a picture of him mingling with the crowd, with the public, when he was inspecting, an area flooded because of, well, I was telling Jean-Pierre that the weather in Jakarta recently is also quite bad with the heavy rainfall, and there was flood around the city. So what Jokowi did, he came, he mingled with people, he saw the situation, no distance, no barrier between him and the citizens. And the people sees that he's one of us. He's one of the people you meet in everyday life. He's nothing like the current president, who is, doing very well, but in a way very well structured and well articulated. And this man, I'm telling you a bit later, is currently the most popular person in Jakarta, in Indonesia. Yeah. And we'll see what will happen afterwards.
It works from the same parties?
No, no, that's also interesting. We'll see later the party composition. So why is it like this? I'm saying that this is a sign of a shift from a vertical structure of power. Vertical means that there is an authority, and the voters, the people, are somehow, in a more patron-client relationship, to a more of a horizontal relationship. I'm taking an example of how in the media, the mainstream media that plays the role of vertical relationship, everything that they quote, everything that they broadcast becomes something that shape the mindset of people. Everything you hear in CNN is something that becomes the buzz that people talks about. But with technology, with Twitter, with Pat, Instagram, or everything, but mainly if it comes to news, it's Twitter. The importance of a particular event is defined not only by one particular media, but it's through a collective combination and interaction of people, of members in that particular community, who feels and decide what is important, what is significant as a news. Because news will go up in the trending topics only if there are enough people read it, retweet it, talk about it, and that defines the significance of one particular event. Therefore, even the president has a Twitter account. SBY has a Twitter account, and I think it's one of the most popular Twitter account with so many followers. Well, simply because he's a president of. I will tell you something about that. He's a president of a Twitter republic. So many Twitter users in the country. Yeah, he needs to be there. He needs to be in a horizontal level. Yeah, he can't be using that vertical approach anymore. Yeah, so here is the situation with Indonesia. 212 million cell phone users. 18 million smartphone users. Yeah, this BlackBerry thing or iPhone or any Android gadgets. It's 18 million of that. And internet user 135 million. Yeah? So this shows the significance of technology and social media in the country. So that's why I'm telling you it's a republic of Twitter. It ranks the 4th in number of Facebook users. It ranks the 5th in the number of Twitter users. But if you look at this ranking, at the top 20 cities of most active Twitters in the world, Jakarta is number 1. So Jakarta is the most active city in the number of tweets in the world. And this usually happens, if you check, the trend is every evening, so from 5 to 9. And why is that? Because that's the period where people goes home from office. Yeah? And that's where they tweet. And why do they tweet? They were tweeting either when they are stuck in traffic, or they were stuck in the packed commuter trains or buses. And what do they tweet? They complain about the inability of government to provide the public infrastructure. So it's a political situation. The Twitter is a political situation. Yeah? Especially every Friday afternoon. This is the peak of all tweets. People wants to go home for weekends, but they spend, I myself have to drive 2 hours to work and 1.5 of 2 hours going back. Yeah? So those are the significance, and those tweets shape the mindset, shape the news, shape the perception on politicians, perception on candidates, and so on. So that's why I'm saying that the shift is also not only from vertical to horizontal, but also from exclusive to inclusive. and from individual to social. Here I'm using the example of, from exclusive to inclusive. Before that, every kids in Indonesia or every kids in the world would want to be rich like Bill Gates. But right now, what they want to be is to be like Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. Seeing that somebody at a young age can be that rich, making them feel that anybody can be rich. Not just, somebody with so much experience. That 20s, 30s guy can be rich. I want to be rich. I can be rich too. That drives entrepreneurial activity. But also from individual to social. If you look at Wall Street, then you see, of course, it's those big companies led by big bosses. But when they see how was Wall Street unable to actually capture, essential elements of how business ethics was important, there was this movement of the Occupy Wall Street. It was an unnamed, unled sort of movement that makes everybody believe anybody can play a role, can participate. That is a global trend that is also happening at home. People feel that they can and they want to be influential. Yeah. Why what? By technology. So my office in that context, I'm working for an office called President's Delivery Unit, as Jean-Pierre mentioned. We created a platform, an online platform called Lapor, which acts like Twitter or like Facebook, where people can report if there is any particular problem with a development project, or any policy that is not in favor of them in its execution. And what do? Those reports that comes to our office, we direct those reports to the particular ministry or agency for those particular minister to act. So why? Because then it will make the citizens feel they are influential, their voices get heard. Yeah.
And you also follow up and refeed the...
Right, exactly. So we have contacts at the ministries where they should respond to that. But when there are response that is unsatisfactory, or sometimes there is no further response, then my boss, the head of the President's Delivery Unit, will write a letter to the minister with copy to the president saying, hey, your ministry has not done this and that, so that the president knows about it.
So what about to the person who complained, the citizen?
So this platform is an online platform where everybody can go. And if there is a response, the particular ministry needs to respond in this platform where everybody can see. So it's very important that there is openness, there is transparency. Yeah? Who has responded, who has not responded, is the response satisfactory or not, people can see. But the biggest challenge is like what you said right now, and there are a ministry or agency that does not follow up. Yeah, that's the issue. So that platform, Laport, won an award in a conference in London last November. So David Cameron and the Vice President of Indonesia, Budiono, was in those conference. So that platform won the Bright Spots Award, and this was the presentation of that platform in that conference. A colleague of mine, his name is Arka, and he was the one who designed that tools, that apps. And what did he say about why he developed that? He was before an apps developer, working for his own before he joins our office. And his aspiration is, I want to be like Mark Zuckerberg, but helping how the government work is managed. And he's a guy who's probably, maybe about his age. Yeah. So this is the combination of how inclusiveness and being social enables the way public participation in a democracy that is combined with the strong role of information technology. And I think that's going to be a trend that's going to come even stronger in the coming year. And the next legacy, which is probably not so positive, but it calls for the need of debottlenecking, so to speak, is because the decentralization that I mentioned, the fact that we have 520 districts and cities, and all are autonomous government, it makes additional bureaucracy and challenges to governance. So here, this is practically how the bottleneck I'm telling you about the traffic looks like. No, well, this is not Jakarta. I think this is DC. Here, the figures say that DC number one in time wasted is in traffic. This is Jakarta. Yeah. And no wonder, because here it shows that in Jakarta alone, every day, there are almost 1,000 new motorcycles on the road. 1,000. And the whole district, the whole greater Jakarta area, about 2,000 motorcycles, just motorcycles, every day. So this economic growth cannot be catered by the ability of bureaucracy to serve the public infrastructure and necessity because of the fast growth of economy and apparently the slow ability of the bureaucracy to handle that, because with decentralization, you have to go through many hands of governments. And this is why is it like that? The main bottleneck is coordination. This is the structure of the cabinet with the president and vice president. And we have 3 coordinating ministers, we have ministers, we have officials at different echelon level. Then we have local governments at provincial level and district and city level. Now, we see that if a program runs in one ministry, then it's usually okay. It's green color. Also, if 2 different ministries, still okay. But when it gets to more than 2 ministries, then it gets more difficult because maybe the ministers come from different political parties, so they don't actually talk to each other. Even worse if then it deals with the governor, because the governor is somebody who is elected by his own constituent and says that I don't reply to the central government. So if there is a problem that the central government face happening in my territory, so be it. Even worse is if you deal with the head of the district or the mayor, who is also the same like the governor, elected directly by the people. So the 3 layers of democracy, everything by the people, is very good, perhaps in participation, but in terms of governance, that's a big headache for my office. You know, you are right. My office is the one distributing that report coming from the SMS or from the Twitter. Then when I pass this to one ministry and that ministry says, well, no, that is the business of that mayor. Then we pass it to the mayor. No, that's you know, the governor is in charge of that. So that's, you know, the excitement of how to handle a situation in such a democracy. So energy sector is an example of this bottleneck. So this structure of hierarchical structure, this is an example of a geothermal power plant project. By the way, geothermal is a very abundant resource in Indonesia for energy resource. But there was one power plant project. It would be the largest in the world. It can save subsidy of $1 million a day, but it was stopped for 20 years at that time. And it took 27 months to tackle this problem, led by the vice president himself. You know, vice president chairing meetings on one particular power plant project, because that project has to deal with Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Forestry, because geothermal area is located in the forest area, Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of Finance needs to provide the government guarantee to make the project move on, the Ministry of State-owned enterprises that runs the state electricity company, and even there is Attorney General that has to be involved in that project. Why? Because people were afraid to be accused of corruption in such a big project like that. So that's why it took more than 2 years to accomplish such a very important and critical project. Yeah. So, and why is it? Because every ministry has their own regulation. Yeah. Oil and gas is a country rich in oil and gas, and it's another showcase of complexity. There are 69 type of permits in oil and gas in Indonesia, 284 number of procedures, and the documents required for that, there are 600,000 sheets of paper for that, issued by 17 agencies, and up to 5,000 permits a year. Why? Again, because every ministry has their own law. Oh, that's an oil and gas project, but coming to my territory, hey, wait a minute, you follow my law. So, and this is a situation where we are suffering of a deficit in energy. So actually oil and gas production especially can be accelerated, but with this situation, it's very difficult. Here, oil and gas sector, forest permit, land acquisition, railway intersection, even railway intersection. You know, if you build a pipeline crossing a railway underneath, you'll need a permit. And the permit comes in the hands of Ministry of Transportation, who will say, I need to check whether there's going to be a problem with this. You know, foreign flag vessel permit, another Ministry of Transportation, and so on. So this is the word of my boss about this situation. This country is suffering from a situation where its right foot is tangled by regulation written by the left hand, simply because the right and the left part cannot talk to each other. In a massive size of a country like Indonesia, where everyone is elected by the public, and where many officials pay their allegiance to their either their particular political parties or other entities. So this is another legacy that needs to be tackled, because then public service delivery is hampered because of this. But this also gives some positive aspect, and that is where the legacy comes. That is where there are CEOs of state-owned enterprises that shows result, then they become leadership inspiration. Despite the difficulty they face with the bureaucracy, if they can deliver, then people cheer them. People see them as, people that they can look up to. One guy is the CEO of the National Railway Company, the Indonesian Railways. So he was able to transform the company, who was previously a red company, into something profitable, only within 5 years. And he improved the service, and he has no nonsense attitude because he comes from the private sector. So now people even talking about him, maybe he can be a presidential candidate from running a railway company. He now boasts that he has managed to do something that India has not managed. That is to bring down the passengers from the top of the train inside. Well, I don't know, maybe is that true? He said that he talked about it to Lalu Prasad Yadav, the Minister of Railway at that time. He said, I can boast to Lalu Prasad, I managed to bring those people down from the rooftop. India hasn't. Yeah. Another thing is the Indonesian Port Corporation. The CEO, Richard Lino, he pushed through to the development to building a new port in Jakarta, new Priok port, which was very difficult to make that happen because a lot of hands in the bureaucracy tried to stop that. Why is it? Because if this port happens, it will be a competitor to Singapore. So it will have the capacity that will be able to catch big ships that up to now cannot go to Jakarta. But he managed to do so. The last one is the CEO of the State Electricity Company. He was winning the anti-corruption award simply because he refused to bow down to pressure, especially from politician pressure for bribery or corruption issues. And that is something in a country like Indonesia where political intervention is very, very strong. So here, another legacy is apparently the difficult situation of bureaucracy and political intervention creates a training ground for people of these public companies, state-owned companies, to be able to perform and convince. And if when they do, people see that, there are actually hope in coming out of these bureaucratic bottlenecks.
Is it the two CEOs there, were they Christian?
Yes, that's interesting. Ignatius Jonan is a Chinese. He's of Chinese origin. Richard Lino is from the eastern part of Indonesia. I'll show you a bit about diversity later. Here, I wouldn't go into detail, but basically the electricity sector reform is even the media say that India, this is an Asia media, you can take a lesson from Indonesia's PLN on how to transform the electricity sector. That's another, global recognition of how you can do that despite the bureaucracy. And at last, the legacy that is important is diversity. Indonesia is a country of 17,000 islands. Sometimes it is 13,000. Maybe because when there is tide, then there are some islands gone. No, that's true, yeah. Because not all islands are inhabited, but still it's massive. And of course, it has diversity of people, language, and so on. But this diversity also bring about the birth of new generation of leaders of the country who are also diverse, mainly young and competent, coming from regional governments. So those people directly elected by the people, many of them are crooks, but when there are good ones, then they also become the inspiration. This guy Jokowi I mentioned, the governor, he was the mayor of Solo, a small town in Central Java. I will show you later what did he do. But he then, because of that, he won the election twice, and then he was elected governor of Jakarta. Ridwan Kamil is a mayor of Bandung, another city near Jakarta. He represents the young generation. He's an architect, educated in the U.S., in Penn State, and he ran on a campaign based on creativity. This kind of, banner. So he's a 30-something guy, and he inspires everybody because he's not a politician, but he ran, and that on him people see that actually somebody who is also not a politician can also be a leader. A woman is leading a city in East Java called Surabaya, the second largest city in Indonesia. You see a woman with veil, a Muslim woman, but she is proven to be a no-nonsense leader. There was a story, she fought the scanty area of a town that is known as a prostitution area, and she fought to vanish that simply because there was a time when she heard that there was an old lady in that prostitution area who said that although she's old, she can still be in business because her main customer are school kids who are able to pay anything. That called for her something to say that this has to stop, although she said her life is threatened. So those, and another guy is, people call him Ahok. So again, that's a Chinese name. His Indonesian name is Basuki Cahayapurnama. He was the head of district in East Belitung. It's a small group of islands in Sumatra. But because of his, and he was elected head of district, being a Chinese, which is not a Muslim, in an area which is 90% Muslim. But he won the election, and after that he ran for governorship in Jakarta with Jokowi, and then he is now the vice governor of Jakarta. So you see the diverse composition of the new generation of leaders in Indonesia. You have women, you have people with foreign education background, but you also have people with minority ethnics and so on. Why is it important to have local leaders? That is good, because decentralization in Indonesia transfers 1/3 of our state budget to the regions. So basically, the central government will handle 2/3, and 1/3 goes to all those heads. So it's very important that we have good people, because it's a very significant portion. And these are the little things that make people trust them. This lady in Surabaya, he transformed the city park in Surabaya to be a public space, and that earned her an award from the Asian townscape. Jokowi, what he did in Solo when he was mayor, he wanted to relocate street vendors from the city center to a market, to an area that is destined for that. And what did he do? He didn't do it by force. What he did was he made a negotiation through 54 times lunch meetings with those street vendors. 54 times, back and forth, just to convince them that moving is good. No pressure, no violation. That took, a democratic spirit and also endurance. That's why he was, recognized as a leader that is, very popular. Ahok, the vice governor of Jakarta, it was very simple. What he did was he put on YouTube, he broadcast on YouTube his meetings with the government official that discuss budget of the city. That made transparency. People can see what are the budget allocation, what for is that. And in that meeting, he even showed that he pressured the head of the public work office to slash down the budget because he said that this is too expensive. I know the range, and you are doing a markup on that project, and that prevents people from, at least to avoid people from corruption, because corruption is still a main challenge in Indonesia. So here, the two gentlemen in this picture, you will see they are wearing the same. They are wearing the same clothes. It's not that because it's in fashion, but that's a cloth that shows that you are a detainee of the Anti-Corruption Commission. And this is the Chief Justice of the country, and the other guy is a head of the National Oil and Gas Agency. Politics may be the root cause of this. So high-cost democracy, because two-party chairmen are right now under probe, and these are parties of the president and member of the coalition. But we can say that actually this is a sign where the government does not interfere on corruption cases. And to close that, what happened after parliamentary election? We will see whether the party will nominate this guy. He's a military general with a dark past, but he might be popular because he is seen as an antithesis of SBY, with a decisive and strong man image. And he will be a forerunner if this man, Jokowi, does not run. But if Jokowi runs, being the most popular person in Indonesia, he would likely to be the next president, this governor of Jakarta. But it will depend on this lady called Megawati Soekarno Putri, the daughter of the founding father of the country, who is the chairwoman of her party, because his nomination will depend on her. If she doesn't nominate him because she wants to keep the party under her family role, then most likely that he will win. This guy who is a general, who is the son-in-law of Suharto, but seen as a decisive guy that might attract people. So there are other candidates of Golkar, the Democrats, the party of the president, might have their candidates too. But again, depends on whether they are able to secure the 20% votes, and maybe there are others. So this is going to be the future leadership of Indonesia. And what are the lessons? I think post-2014, Indonesia would have to be dealt with a participative approach, no longer an authoritative approach. People need to lead by example and action, not only by instruction. And, more and more devil is in the detail. So big vision is good. You want to go be in the G20, but people will trust more on how you execute things. And execution is not easy, but if you do execute well, then you are well recognized. And at last, you have to go local, not just central. As countries, as corporations, when you go to Indonesia, you have to pay attention and deal with the local government, not only with the central government. That's going to be tiring, that's going to be a challenge, but that's how the future of Indonesia will be. With that, I thank you for your attention, and maybe one or two questions will be good. Thank you.
very much. I'm sitting next to Agung's telephones, and my sense is that the traffic in Jakarta must be very bad at the moment. Lots and lots of tweets throughout. Anyway, this was a great presentation. Thank you very much indeed. Can I invite comments, questions?
Yes.
You talked about democracy. The two major contenders, one is the son-in-law of General Suharto, and the other is the daughter of Sukarno.
Right.
So, is this democracy or it's family?
We
Unfortunately,
never have anything like this in India.
We always want it.
this is why everyone wants to see him run, because that's going to be a sign that somebody who comes out of nowhere, he was a furniture shop owner before he ran as a mayor. But if he makes it as a president, then people will cheer him as, you know.
Problem. He wants to do it, but she may stop him.
He would do it if she gives the blessing, because her party article of association stated that the party chairman or chairwoman decides who runs. That's the problem.
And he cannot run as independent thanks to your constitution.
Unfortunately, he cannot, or he can run under the support of other political parties, but looks like he doesn't want to betray his own party. And right now, he's been a governor of the city for about only 500 days. So if he ran under a different ticket, then he would have difficulty from his own party.
And she may run again?
And that's why if she runs, then she will lose, because it's going to be the third time she loses. So if she runs, the most likelihood is he wins, or somebody that, maybe there are some.
This is Bangladesh repeated all over again.
Yeah, but this guy had a break with Suharto's past. He divorced. Well, I should have said he is the former son-in-law, because the wife of Suharto divorced him, and he's taking a distance from Suharto. But we never know. He might build coalition with the guy over here or over here. Yeah. The only party right now that has no family ties is this. Interestingly, the party of Suharto in the past, Golkar, is now not run by any family-based person. But this guy is a business magnate. So
how many of the 12 major parties are Islamists in their orientation?
That's interesting. Only about 2 of them, which are really purely Islamist. So this party portrays itself like the Refah party in Turkey of Prime Minister Erdogan, but it is the party that I've shown having problem with corruption issue. This is another Islamic party, but a very minor party. The other parties are having their mass in Islamic organization, but not using Islam as their formal, so to speak, root. PPP, yes, PPP is an Islamic party, but it doesn't state in their basis that, unlike here, for example, that it is an Islamic party. So PPP, PAN, which is based on Muhammadiyah, and PKB, which is based on Nahdlatul Ulama, the organization of former Abdurrahman Wahid. They are based on, they're trying to forge the votes of non-Islam as well. But if you see, the big parties are all the non-Islamic or the secular parties. A poll shows that the Islamic party might garner, less than. At most, each party can gain 5% votes. That's the situation.
I think
Yes.
And the other parties are mixed on that means.
Ethnics.
But it's mixed, it's not specifically Christian or...
No.
It's a mix.
It's a mix. In the past, there were one or two Christian parties, but this time apparently they were not. Well, in order to qualify to run for election, they need to have enough number of members, number of support and so on. So they didn't qualify this time, as well as a number of many parties. So in the past, we had about 40 parties. This election, we have actually the smallest number of parties, with 12.
Okay, I'll just make two quick comments. One is that, thank you. I mean, this is very, very interesting, very, very, we've learned a lot. I think when you're talking about this sort of crisis of democracy and you're looking at Indonesia, I think the point the economist made is that you do have these crises in Ukraine and Thailand and so on and so forth, virtually everywhere. But even in places you don't have crises, you have a leadership problem. So I think there, in a sense, when you're looking, SBY has done a good job, the transition. I mean, I think it's very difficult to think of a country where you could say that, the head of state, head of government is actually looked up to. Certainly not in France. 17% popularity. I just want to make a quick parenthesis here, so attacking my own country. I don't know if you've heard that the Minister of Sport of France refused to go to the opening of the Paralympics in Sochi for political protest. But over the weekend, we sold 2 aircraft carriers or helicopter carriers to the Russians. So, I mean, so much for being modeled. I think the other takeaways, really this Open Government Indonesia project is fascinating. Really fascinating. And that's something that we might ask you more about.
Sure.
Because I think we have to stop, unfortunately, because of time, but lots of questions about it. Because there are attempts in India also to getting these kinds of things going. Surely it has to be an answer, not the answer. And I think what you showed us very briefly here is very appetizing, and perhaps we could do something on that.
Yeah, sure. Indonesia is currently the co-chair of Open Government Partnership together with Mexico, and we are going to organize a big conference in Bali in May. So that might be an opportunity to work further on this area.
Meet you all in Bali in May.
Why not?
Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you.